The stars above Eidolon Prime shimmered as if the universe itself was holding its breath. On the Vigilance Bridge, Commander Ilara Vance stood with her hands resting lightly on the tactical table, eyes fixed on the swirling crimson icons bleeding into the system's edge. Each represented a Dravkar warship, heavy cruisers, carriers, destroyers, hundreds of them, moving in tight, predatory formation. "Contact confirmed," her sensor officer reported. "Range: 1.8 light minutes. Acceleration steady. No deviation from intercept course." The Dravkar weren't posturing anymore. They were coming. Ilara's gaze didn't leave the tactical display. "Comms, prep the transmission. Standard package, Terran and Dravkar protocol." Her voice was steady, almost detached. Inside, her mind was already running calculations, fleet positions, orbital assets, firing arcs. She had known this moment was coming since the first deep space probes spotted the enemy fleet weeks ago. A faint vibration passed through the deck as the vigilant systems shifted to full combat readiness. Holoscreens brightened, status bars shifting to green. Outside, the planet's defensive platforms began rotating toward the oncoming force. "Message loaded, Commander," the comms officer said. "Send it." Across every open frequency, in every code and tongue the Dravkar could parse, the words pulsed into the void. "Turn back or be destroyed." Far across the gulf of space, aboard the Dominion flagship Blood of Var, High Marshal Korath Vesh leaned forward in his command throne. The human warning scrolled across a side display. His upper lip curled into something between amusement and disgust. "Destroy us," he said, voice low, guttural. His bridge crew shifted uneasily, not at the message, but at his tone. "They've mistaken their borrowed years for strength." One of his captains, a scarred veteran with a stiff tail, spoke cautiously. "High Marshal, the humans have fought hard wars before. Their resistance on Halcyon." "Was the death throes of prey too stupid to run?" Korath cut in. His eyes, black and sharp as obsidian, flicked to the tactical projection. "We break them here. Eidolon Prime will burn, and the Terrans will learn their place." The bridge lights dimmed to red as he gave the only order he thought worthy of his name. "Advance." Back on the Vigilant, Ilara listened as the enemy response was relayed, silent in words, loud in motion. The Dravkar formation tightened, drives burning hotter. No change of course. No hesitation. "They've ignored it," said Lieutenant Mora, her tactical officer. His tone was flat, but Ilara caught the faint flicker in his eyes. Anticipation. "As expected," she replied. "Initiate Phase 1. Bridge crew moved instantly. Stealth drones hidden in the asteroid belt powered up. Patrol ships altered course to intercept. Deep space relays began transmitting falsified fleet movement data into the Dravkar comnets. Her XO, Commander Aaron Joss, stepped closer. "We're still outnumbered 10-1. Even with the platforms." "Numbers aren't the point," Ilara said. "They believe this is a war of ships." "It isn't." Joss studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Understood." Ilara allowed herself a brief glance at Eidolon Prime through the viewport. From here, the planet's surface was a swirl of blue and green, a living thing worth every risk. It had taken a generation to terraform Eidolon into a second Earth. She wasn't going to let the Dravkar take it, not while she drew breath. Hours passed in tense, precise preparation. Reports flowed in from scout craft shadowing the enemy's flanks. The Dravkar had dispatched a vanguard of fast-attack frigates, perfect bait for the opening engagement. "They're moving into the belt corridor," Mora confirmed. Ilara leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. The corridor's twisting asteroid fields were laced with mines, railgun nests, and decoy buoys, all invisible until too late. A battlefield sculpted for ambush. "Let them think it's a weakness," she said quietly. "Then close the door." On the Blood of Var, Korath reviewed the early reports. A handful of human ships had appeared along his vanguard's route, exchanged token fire, and fallen back toward the belt. His captains pressed him for permission to pursue, eager for trophies. "They flee already," one commander said with a snarl. "They are wise enough to run," another offered. Korath's teeth flashed in a predatory grin. "Or foolish enough to think they can hide. Chase them. Sweep their hiding places clean." His order went out, and the hunters entered the belt. On the Vigilant, the sensor feed lit up with fresh contacts, enemy frigates breaking formation, pushing deeper into the trap. Ilara traced their path with a fingertip across the display. "They'll reach Mine Cluster Theta in 4 minutes, Mora said. "Stand by drones," Ilara ordered. 4 minutes later, the asteroid belt came alive. Silent mines detonated in precise patterns, not to destroy outright, but to corral. Rocks the size of buildings shifted from their natural orbits, tumbling into the path of the alien ships. Hidden railguns fired from impossible angles, punching through armor. And from the shadow of a massive asteroid, 3 Terran stealth corvettes surged forward, launching swarms of hunter-killer drones into the chaos. The Dravkar frigates fought hard, their weapons blazing, but without coordination, they were meat in a grinder. One by one, they were crippled, drifting among the rocks. Karath received the report in silence. His claws drummed once against the arm of his throne. "Losses are regrettable," his aide began, but the High Marshal waved him off. "They've bloodied a few hounds. It changes nothing." Still, his gaze lingered on the tactical feed longer than before. Ilara stood at the center of the Vigilance Bridge, watching the engagement's conclusion. It had gone as planned, quick, efficient, demoralizing. But she knew it was only the opening move. The bulk of the Dravkar fleet remained untouched, still pushing toward Eidolon Prime. She tapped a control, bringing up the wider system map. Multiple red icons now converged toward the moon's gravity corridor, a narrow path between the planet and its largest moon. Exactly where she wanted them. "Lieutenant Mora," she said, "begin Phase 2. Make sure they see what we want them to see." "Yes, Commander." A flicker of satisfaction passed through her as she watched falsified fleet readings seed themselves into the enemy's channels. The Dravkar would believe reinforcements were inbound from the far side of the system. They would rush to crush the humans before that could happen. She glanced at the chrono. Within 30 hours, this would be decided, one way or another. On the blood of Var, Karatha's captains argued over the incoming intelligence. Reinforcements, they claimed. Human capital ships closing from the outer rim. Karatha's decision was swift. "We will not wait for them to gather. We will strike now, with everything." As his flagship turned toward the gravity corridor, he bared his fangs once more. By the time their friends arrive, there will be nothing left to save. Ilara closed her eyes for a moment, shutting out the glow of the tactical display. She could feel the weight of the coming battle, not just for herself, but for the crews under her command, for the civilians sheltering on Eidolon Prime, for the message this fight would send to the rest of the galaxy. When she opened them again, they were clear, steady, and cold. "Battle stations," she said. The asteroid belt surrounding Eidolon's outer moon was quiet, too quiet for the Dravkar vanguard pushing through it. The belt's shadowed rocks drifted in slow arcs, their surfaces scarred by ancient collisions. In the void, silence was normal. Here, it was a warning. On the Vigilant, Commander Ilara Vance leaned over the tactical display, tracking the red icons threading deeper into the narrow corridors between drifting stone. The Dravkar frigates advanced in tight spearhead formation, drives glowing white-hot. "They're almost at the pinch point," reported Lieutenant Mora. His voice was steady, but his gaze flicked often to the countdown in the corner of his screen. 2 minutes until the first mines triggered. "Confirm drone readiness," Ilara said. "Stealth swarm holding position, signal masked by belt interference," replied the operations officer. "Weapons hot." Her XO, Commander Joss, stood just behind her shoulder. "We could drop them now and catch the whole spearhead." Ilara shook her head. "Patience. Let them feel secure. The longer they think they're in control, the deeper they commit." Far ahead, aboard the lead Dravkar frigate Iron Fong, Captain Vurak scanned the asteroid field through his forward viewport. "Primitive battlefield," he muttered to his weapons officer. "Rocks and scrap. This is what they hide behind." His weapons officer, a younger warrior, kept his eyes forward. "Prey is prey. They can cover themselves in mountains. It will not save them." A sharp ping from the sensor console interrupted. "Object detected. No, 2, no, gone," the sensor tech reported. "Transient signatures. Could be." A sudden vibration rippled through the deck as a mine went off far to port. The detonation wasn't aimed at them, It struck an asteroid, nudging it into the frigate's projected path. On the Vigilant, Ilara's lips thinned. "First push," she ordered. In the belt, a dozen hidden mines triggered in sequence, each explosion precise, redirecting asteroids into the narrow gaps ahead. The formation slowed, weaving to avoid collisions. That hesitation was all she needed. "Release swarm," she said. The drones emerged from behind drifting stone, matte black hulls blending into the void until their engines flared. Each was barely the size of a fighter cockpit, but fast, agile, and armed with twin-pulse cannons and a single warhead. The Dravkar frigates opened fire immediately, bright lances cutting through the darkness. Drones weaved, darted, split apart into unpredictable patterns. A handful died in the opening volleys, the rest closed the distance. Explosions flared along the Iron Fang's flanks, engine housings shredded, shields collapsing in bursts of white light. Another frigate's comm array vanished in a spray of molten shards. On the Blood of Var, Korath Vesh listened to the first real casualty reports with growing irritation. "Minor losses," the Vanguard commander said over the channel, but the static cutting through the transmission told another story. "Unexpected mines, small autonomous craft, nothing we can't clear." "They fight like vermin," Korath said, rising from his throne. "Biting, retreating, hiding. Sweep them from the belt. I want the path clear." In the belt, Ilara's trap was unfolding exactly as planned. 2 enemy frigates disabled, Mora reported. Another's limping, shields failing. "Pull swarm back to cover," Ilara ordered. "Let them think they've driven us off." "Commander?" Joss asked, a hint of doubt in his tone. She glanced at him. "If we press too hard now, they'll slow their advance. I want them aggressive, chasing shadows all the way into the corridor." Minutes later, the last drone vanished behind the rocks, their retreat deliberate. The surviving frigates surged forward, eager for clean space. They didn't notice the trail of falsified sensor echoes bleeding from the drone's comm bursts, breadcrumbs leading deeper toward the real battlefield. Ilara studied the updated map. "Signal to Kestrel and Talon. Prepare harassment run along the outer flank. No sustained engagement, just enough to keep them guessing." "Aye, Commander," the comms officer replied. The Kestrel and Talon, both small fast-attack corvettes, emerged from the planet's shadow hours later, their drives spiking bright as they dove toward the Dravkar flank. Railguns spat kinetic rounds at long range, enough to punch holes in armor plating, not enough to sink a capital ship. The point was noise, movement, distraction. On the Blood of Var, Korath snarled at the tactical chaos. "Where is their main force?" he demanded. "Every engagement is with gnats." One of his senior tacticians hesitated before answering. "It is possible. They're delaying. Waiting for reinforcements." Karatha's expression hardened. "Then we will give them no time to arrive." On the Vigilant, Ilara's crew relayed the intercepted comm bursts from the Dravkar flagship. Their words were blunt, overconfident. They still believed the humans were avoiding a decisive battle because they lacked the strength for one. "They think we're stalling," Joss said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Good," Ilara replied. "The more they believe that, the more likely they'll walk right where I want them." In the small hours of the ship's cycle, Ilara took a moment in her ready room. The lights were low, the hum of the ship's core faint through the walls. She looked at the hollow image floating above her desk, Eidolon Prime from orbit, its oceans bright under reflected starlight. Below it, the slowly rotating blue sphere of Earth, taken centuries earlier. They'd fought for that blue sphere for millennia. They'd fight for this one too. When she returned to the bridge, new reports awaited. The Dravkar Vanguard had rejoined the main body. Their fleet was accelerating toward the moon's gravity corridor, the narrow path she'd seeded with more than just mines. Orbital defense platforms waited there, cloaked among rock and debris, their firing arcs covering every angle. "They've taken the bait," Mora said quietly. Ilara nodded once. "Good. Now we make sure they keep it." In the alien flagship, Korath stood before the forward viewport, the silver arc of Eidolon's moon dominating the scene. Beyond it, Eidolon itself glowed faintly, a prize worth the campaign. He imagined the human cities in flames, the Terran fleets shattered. The thought was intoxicating. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Prepare for full engagement." On the Vigilant, Ilara gave her own orders. All units, maintain stealth until the signal. Let them pass deep enough that retreat becomes difficult. A ripple of acknowledgments came in across the secure network. She looked once more at the tactical projection, red enemy icons moving steadily into the kill zone. Every step they took now was one they wouldn't be able to take back. By the end of the next cycle, the Dravkar fleet would commit entirely to the corridor. And when they did, the Shadow War would end, and the hammer would fall. Ilara turned from the display. "Bridge to all stations," she said. "Stand ready." The Dravkar fleet slid into the gravity corridor like a spear into its sheath. Ilara Vance watched their icons crawl across the tactical display, one by one vanishing behind the simulated mass shadows of drifting debris. The corridor was narrow, 50,000 kilometers wide at most, but deceptively deep, curving down toward Eidolon's moon like a funnel. "They're committed," Lieutenant Mora said, barely hiding the tension in his voice. "They don't know it yet," Ilara replied. "They still think they're hunting us." Her XO, Commander Joss, crossed his arms. This corridor was built for commerce, not combat. If anything goes wrong, we won't give them the chance to make it go wrong, she cut in. Signal to all units. We begin Phase 2. Hidden among the rubble fields flanking the corridor, the human fleet's listening posts came alive. Arrays unfolded, power cells surged, and encrypted bursts skipped across the network. Farther ahead, cloaked defense platforms pivoted their heavy batteries into position. From one of those platforms, Captain Reese Calder sent a terse update, guns aligned. "Target lock steady. Give me the word and I'll punch a hole in their lead ship." Ilara read the transmission and didn't answer. "Not yet." On the blood of Var, Korath Vesh paced the command deck. The corridor narrowed ahead, the moon's pale bulk loomed larger in the viewport. "Still no sign of their main force?" he demanded. "Only small craft sightings," his tactical chief answered. "They flee before we can pin them." Karatha's voice dropped into a growl. "Then they know they cannot win in open battle." His second-in-command, a grizzled veteran named Dravik, stepped forward. "Or they want us here. This path is too quiet." Korath turned his gaze on him. "We are warriors. We do not turn aside because prey leaves bait in our path." "Prey can still set a trap," Dravik replied, low enough that only Korath heard. The warlord smiled thinly. "Let them try." Back on the Vigilant, Ilara's team intercepted those very words. The alien tongue translated into cold text on the holotable. Joss leaned over her shoulder. "They're arrogant," he said. "That's good for us." "It's dangerous for them," she corrected. "And that's better for us." Hours passed as the Dravkar fleet crept deeper into the corridor. The moon's gravity tugged them forward. The debris fields channeled them into predictable lanes. Ilara's forward scouts reported that the enemy's screening ships were fanning wider, trying to probe for hidden threats. She allowed them to find a few mines that detonated in harmless arcs, leaving scorch marks on passing hulls but causing no real damage. "They'll think our minefield is weak," Mora observed. "They'll think exactly what I want them to," Ilara replied. The real pressure point came when the alien fleet's midpoint reached the second choke. Here, the walls of the corridor rose in jagged ridges of ancient rock, with just enough room for two capital ships to pass abreast. Hidden within those ridges, magnetic charges clung like barnacles, silent and waiting. "Trigger on my mark," Ilara said into her headset. In the narrow pass, the Dravkar destroyer Rend Claw glided forward, its shields glowing faintly against scattered dust impacts. On its bridge, the crew scanned for movement among the rocks. They never saw the first charge go off. A silent flash, a distortion of space, and a half-ton of molten metal sprayed across their starboard flank. Shields buckled, atmosphere vented from ruptured compartments. A second blast tore into their aft, shearing away maneuvering thrusters. The Rend Claw spun slowly, blocking the lane behind it. On the blood of Var, alarms barked. "Mid-column vessel disabled, blocking traffic," reported the tactical chief. Karatha's mandibles flexed. "Clear the wreck and press forward." "It will take time," Dravik warned. "This narrows our formation. Then we crush whatever lies ahead before it matters," Korath snapped. In the human fleet, Ilara seized the moment. Phase 3, she ordered. Defense platforms on both sides of the choke erupted in fire. Railguns spat hypersonic slugs, energy lances slashed through alien armor. The confined space amplified the violence. There was nowhere to dodge, nowhere to scatter without colliding with rock or wreckage. Dravkar ships returned fire, their plasma bolts carving through the debris. Entire chunks of ridge shattered, tumbling into the void. But for every platform they destroyed, 2 more kept firing. Joss leaned toward Ilara. We can hold this position for hours, but if they break through... They won't break through, she said, her tone steel. Not while they're fighting the terrain as much as us. Karatha's forward ships finally pushed past the choke, their drives flaring hard. Plasma torpedoes streaked toward the nearest platform, detonating in a sphere of green fire. The defenders pulled back deeper into the shadows, drawing them farther from their own support. On the Vigilant, Ilara watched the battle lines shift. She had them where she wanted, but the real strike was still ahead. She keyed the fleet-wide secure channel. All units, prepare for converging assault at Point Delta. We hit them from 3 vectors when they reach the bend. No one fires until my signal. In the quiet that followed, she could feel the collective breath of her crews, tens of thousands of lives holding still, waiting for the one moment to turn the tide. Dravik stood at Karatha's side, eyes narrowed at the tactical hollow. Their fire is coordinated. Too coordinated for a retreating force. Karath ignored the warning, staring ahead at the bend in the corridor. Beyond that curve lies open approach to the moon. We break them there, and the path to the planet is ours. Dravik didn't argue further. The warlord's certainty was a wall no caution could breach. Minutes later, the Dravkar fleet rounded the bend. The corridor widened, but only slightly. Ahead, the debris field thinned just enough to suggest safety. That was when Ilara gave the signal. From the darkness above the corridor's upper wall, a formation of human cruisers emerged, their hulls shedding cloaking shimmer. Below, hidden among shadowed rock, missile barges lit their drives. From behind, the Kestrel and Talon reappeared, racing in with afterburners flaring. Missiles streaked from every vector. Energy beams lanced downward. Kinetic rounds slammed into Dravkar shields faster than the eye could follow. In the first 30 seconds, 3 enemy ships were gutted. A 4th erupted in a chain of internal detonations, spinning away into the void. Karath roared, his voice shaking the command deck. Full counterattack. Tear them apart. But the geometry of the trap worked against him. His ships couldn't bring all their guns to bear at once. For every human vessel that took a hit, another fired uninterrupted. On the Vigilant, Ilara's hands gripped the edge of the command table. Press them. No mercy. Joss's voice was calm, almost cold. They'll either retreat or die here. Ilara didn't look away from the display. They won't retreat. By the time the first wave ended, the corridor was littered with drifting wreckage, some human, far more Dravkar. And deeper still, the surviving enemy ships were being driven into the final kill zone. The pressure point had been reached. The battlefield was awound in space. Shattered hulls drifted like bone fragments, tumbling in the moon's dim light. Firelight flickered on the ridges, dying ships coughing vapor into the vacuum. The airless silence was broken only by the constant bass hum of the Vigilance engines and the staccato reports of weapon discharges. Ilara stood motionless at the command table. The tactical display painted a brutal picture. The Dravkar formation had fractured into 3 pockets, each pinned by overlapping fire lanes. They had no room to maneuver, no room to regroup. Enemy flagship holding position, Joss reported. They're trying to rally their line. Ilara's eyes locked on the central icon pulsing red. Then that's where we finish this. On the blood of Var, Korath Vesh braced against the shock of another impact. A railgun slug had punched through their port shield, tearing deep into the outer hull. Warning glyphs flared across the displays. They're coming for us, Dravik said. Good, Korath snarled. They'll come into our claws. But even as he said it, the truth pressed in. The humans had anticipated every turn. Every advance led into fire, every retreat into another trap. The corridor's jagged walls were closing around them like teeth. Ilara didn't wait for them to try another push. All wings, converge on the flagship. Priority target. I want every gun we have locked on its drive section. Aye, Captain, Moore replied, relaying the orders. Missile cruisers emerged from behind debris clouds, their launch tubes spitting guided payloads. Heavy frigates advanced in disciplined formation, railguns tracking the flagship's silhouette. Above, 2 destroyers skimmed the edge of the upper ridge, angling to drop plasma bursts directly onto the Dravkar's dorsal armor. Inside the blood of Var, the deck pitched under repeated strikes. The inertial dampeners strained, groaning under the stress. They've crippled our aft starboard engines, the engineering chief shouted. Redirect power to forward batteries. Korath barked. We'll burn through them. Dravik moved closer, speaking low. Warlord, if we hold this position, they'll pin us here until we're bled out. Karatha's eyes burned. We break them here, or we die. There is no other path. On the human side, the trap was tightening. Destroyer group is in range, Joss said. Awaiting your mark. Ilara gave a single nod. Fire. Twin lances of white-hot plasma plunged down from the ridgeline. The blood of Var's dorsal shields flared, overloaded, and collapsed. Armor plating buckled, venting a stream of molten metal into space. The Warlord's flagship shuddered but did not falter. Its forward guns lit the dark, tearing a human destroyer in half. The wreck spun, trailing burning fragments, before smashing into a fragment of ridge and scattering in a glittering arc. Ilara, Joss said quietly, we're trading ships too fast. I know, she replied, voice low. But if the flagship falls, their will to fight goes with it. Korath saw his moment when the destroyer died. Push through the upper flank. 3 of his remaining cruisers surged upward, blasting at the ridge, trying to widen the gap. They punched through fragments of rock, clearing a lane. But before they could exploit it, a squadron of human strike craft swept in from the shadows. The fighters dove in pairs, weaving between wrecks, releasing torpedoes that detonated at point-blank range. 2 alien cruisers vanished in fire, the third spun crippled, venting atmosphere from a jagged wound in its hull. The Vigilant pressed forward now, leading the attack. The flagship's bow guns fired in punishing rhythm, each shot slamming into the blood of Var's failing shields. Mora glanced at Ilara. At this rate, we'll breach their primary hull in under 2 minutes. Her gaze didn't leave the display. Make it 1. Korath gripped the edge of his command chair. Signal to all ships, charge with me. Straight at the Vigilant. Dravik stared at him. That will expose our flank. They already own our flank, Korath growled. Better to strike the head than die picking at the tail. The alien fleet obeyed. What was left of it surged forward in a brutal, desperate spearhead. They're coming straight for us, Joss said. Ilara's pulse quickened. Hold the line. Pull the forward escorts into a shield wall. Frigates shifted formation, their overlapping shields forming a barrier of energy. The Vigilant loomed just behind them, guns ready. The first impacts slammed into the barrier, rippling energy across its surface. Alien plasma splashed against it, bleeding away into the void. Then the human line opened just enough for their heavy weapons to fire through. A broadside from the Vigilant's port batteries ripped across the Dravkar spearhead, smashing smaller escorts apart. Railgun slugs drilled into the blood of Var's forward armor, tearing deep into its internal decks. Fires raged in compartments open to the cold. Korath roared, slamming a clawed hand on the armrest. More power! Drive us through! But the flagship was bleeding momentum. One of its forward drives sputtered, dead. The corridor ahead narrowed again, and there was no escape route. Ilara, Joss said, we've got them. Not yet, she answered. Finish it. Every ship in her fleet poured fire into the blood of Var. The concentrated barrage punched through the Warlord's armor, lanced his power core, and ignited a chain reaction deep inside the vessel. On the flagship's bridge, alarms screamed. Flames licked along the ceiling as containment failed. Dravik grabbed Koratha's arm. We have to abandon. No, the Warlord rasped, blood darkening his mandibles. The blood of Var dies with me. The final blast ripped through the command deck. Light swallowed the Warlord, the crew, and the ship itself. The explosion rolled down the corridor like a tidal wave, scattering debris in a burning storm. On the Vigilant, The bridge crew watched the flagship's icon vanish. Silence followed, first on sensors, then in the comm channels as the remaining Dravkar ships broke formation and fled. "They're running," Mora said, almost in disbelief. Ilara let out a slow breath. "Then we don't chase. Not today." The moon hung silent ahead, its pale surface washed in the light of drifting fires. The corridor was littered with wreckage, testament to how close the line between victory and annihilation had been. Joss stepped to her side. "We broke them here." "For now," she replied. Her gaze lingered on the moon. "But this was only the first blade they sent at us. Others will follow." She turned away from the viewport. "Signal recovery crews. We save who we can." The battle's roar was gone. In its place came the whisper of cooling metal, the faint crackle of distant fires, and the low hum of emergency power grids. The void beyond the Vigilance viewport was strewn with wreckage, shattered hulls drifting in slow, stately arcs, broken weapons glinting in pale light. It looked less like victory and more like a graveyard. Ilara stood at the glass, hands clasped behind her back. Her reflection stared back, eyes shadowed, jaw tight. She could still feel the vibrations from the last salvo through the deck plates, like a phantom heartbeat. "Captain," Mora said quietly, stepping up beside her. "Recovery teams are ready to deploy." Ilara nodded. "Send them. Full spectrum scan, any life signs, ours or theirs." Down in the hangar bay, crew worked in near silence. Dropships sat lined and ready, hulls patched with emergency sealant, pilots strapping into cracked harnesses. The medics moved among them, faces pale but steady. Lieutenant Rin adjusted his helmet, glanced at his squad, and said, "We pull back anyone breathing. Doesn't matter whose uniform they're wearing." No one questioned it. The first recovery wave pushed into the debris field. Shards of alloy drifted like icebergs in black water. They threaded carefully between them, sensors sweeping, floodlights cutting cones of pale light into the dark. A beacon pinged from a half-shattered frigate hull. The dropship latched on, mag seals hissing. Rin's squad forced the hatch open, revealing a corridor warped by fire. The air inside was acrid, heavy with scorched insulation. They found 3 survivors, 2 humans, 1 Dravkar warrior slumped against a bulkhead, armor cracked. The alien's breathing was ragged, a low rattle. Rin hesitated only a second before signaling the medic forward. Back on the Vigilant, Joss sifted through the sensor returns. "We're picking up scattered escape pods, some drifting out past the ridgeline." "Retrieve them all," Ilara ordered. "The cold doesn't care about sides." Hours passed in a rhythm of grim rescues. Every ship brought back more wounded than whole. The med bay overflowed, stretchers lining the corridors outside. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the copper tang of blood. Ilara walked the rows, speaking briefly with each conscious crew member she passed. A gunner from the Resolute gripped her wrist, whispering, "We held the line, Captain." She gave him the smallest nod, though the words felt like a weight. In the far wing of the med bay, the rescued Dravkar stirred under a thermal shroud. His eyes focused on her as she approached, vertical pupils narrowing. "You could have left me," he rasped. "I could have," she replied evenly. A long silence hung between them. Then he gave a shallow nod. "Then you are not as I was told." She didn't answer, moving on before the conversation could dig its hooks any deeper. The bridge felt quieter now, though the work never slowed. Status reports scrolled across holoscreens, damage estimates, ammunition counts, casualty lists. Each number was a ledger mark in a book no one wanted to read. "Engineering says our port armor is down to 30% integrity," Mora reported. 2 primary guns offline. Multiple shield generators burned out. Ilara exhaled. "We'll have to limp back to Ardent Spire for repairs." Joss looked up from his console. "The Council's going to want a full account before we even dock." "They'll get one," she said, "but it won't be dressed for them." As the Vigilant turned toward home, the comms officer's voice broke in. "Captain, incoming transmission from Ardent Spire Command. It's Priority 1. Ilara stepped to the comm table. The image of Admiral Cashin flickered into being, lined face, eyes sharp. "You did it," he said without preamble. "The Dravkar flagship is gone. The corridors secure. For now, she said. His gaze hardened. Intelligence suggests their war council won't take this loss lightly. You may have bought us weeks, maybe days. Her jaw tightened. Then we use them. That night, or what passed for night aboard ship, the crew gathered in the mess hall. Not for celebration. There was no laughter here. Plates of untouched food sat cooling while people traded quiet words, glances heavy with fatigue. Rin sat with his squad, helmet resting on the table. We pulled 7 out of that wreck, he said to no one in particular. For we're gone before we hit Med Bay. A mechanic at the next table murmured, You still brought 3 back. Doesn't feel like enough, Rin said. Ilara didn't join them. She stayed in her quarters, recording the after-action report in her own voice before the official account scrubbed the edges. She spoke of the trap, the cost, the dead, naming them all. It was not for the council, it was for her, a record of what the clean reports never said. When she was done, she sat for a long time in the dark, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the ridgeline and the debris fields, the Dravkar were gathering again. In the early hours, a knock at her door. Mora entered, holding a thin tablet. Final casualty count. Ilara took it without looking at the number. Put it in the memorial log. Mora hesitated. There's something else. One of the Dravkar survivors is asking for you. Ilara arched a brow. The one from the Var. Mora nodded. Says he has information. The alien sat in a secure med-bay chamber, bandages winding around his torso. His eyes followed her closely. You fought well, he said. This isn't a conversation for compliments. He inclined his head. Then hear this, the loss of the blood of Var will ignite a warlash. They will send not one fleet, but many. And they will come for you first. Ilara's expression didn't shift. Why warn me? Because the war you think you're fighting is smaller than the one that's coming. She left without promising anything. On the bridge later, she found herself looking out at the wreckage still drifting in their wake. The fires were fading now, the pieces scattering wider. Soon they would be gone from sight, but not from memory. Helm, she said softly, take us home. The Vigilance engines rumbled to life, and the battlefield slid away behind them, swallowed by the dark.